The air was thick with the scent of freshly turned earth and the cloying sweetness of funeral lilies. I stood at the edge of the grave, my black dress fluttering in the warm breeze, as the mourners began to disperse. That's when I saw him, my brother Jude, striding towards me with a look of determination on his face. "Raven," he said, his voice low and steady, "we need to talk." I tensed, my fingers tightening around the stem of the single rose I held. "What do you want, Jude?" "You know what I want," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "My share of the inheritance. Mom had no right to cut me out of the will." I laughed bitterly. "No right? After everything you've put this family through? The drugs, the lies, the stealing?" Jude's face darkened. "That's in the past, Raven. I've changed." "Have you?" I challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still the same selfish, manipulative bastard you've always been." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Don't test me, little sister. I'll contest the will if I have to. I'll drag this whole thing out in court." I met his gaze unflinchingly. "Go ahead. I'm not afraid of you, Jude. Not anymore." As he turned and stalked away, I felt a wave of memories wash over me. Growing up, Jude had always been the golden child, charming, athletic, popular, but beneath that shining exterior lurked a darkness that consumed him, and by extension, our entire family. I remember the nights he'd stumble home, high out of his mind, raging at our parents for trying to control him. The mornings I'd find Mom crying at the kitchen table, another piece of her jewelry missing, pawned off to feed Jude's habit. And then there was the accident, the one that shattered our family beyond repair. Jude behind the wheel, too strung out to see straight, and our little sister Lily, just 16 years old, in the passenger seat. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing away the image of her broken body, the scream of sirens, the sterile white walls of the hospital where we said our final goodbyes. After that, Mom cut Jude off completely. She couldn't bear to look at him, to be reminded of the child she'd lost because of his recklessness. And I was left to pick up the pieces, to move back to this God-forsaken small town and take care of her as she withered away from grief and illness. Now, standing at her graveside, I felt the weight of my inheritance settling on my shoulders. The house, the money, the responsibility, it was all mine now. And I'd be damned if I let Jude swoop in and take it away from me. I looked up at the sky, the sun filtering through the leaves of the old oak tree that shaded the cemetery. "I won't let you down, Mom," I whispered. "I promise." With a deep breath, I turned and walked away from the grave, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Jude may have been my brother, but he was also my greatest adversary. And I was ready for battle. The drive back to the old family home was a blur, my mind still reeling from the confrontation with Jude at the funeral. As I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia mixed with a sense of dread. This place held so many memories, both good and bad, and now it was mine alone to deal with. I stepped inside, the musty smell of neglect hitting me like a wave. Mom had been too sick to keep up with the housework in her final months, and I'd been too busy caring for her to do much more than the bare minimum. I sighed, knowing I had my work cut out for me if I wanted to get this place back in shape. As I wandered through the rooms, my mind drifted back to the decision I'd made 5 years ago to leave behind my life in the city and move back home to take care of Mom. It hadn't been an easy choice, but I knew it was the right one. She needed me, and I couldn't bear the thought of her facing her illness alone. But now, with her gone and Jude circling like a vulture, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in over my head. What if he made good on his threat to contest the will? What if he brought his trouble back to this town, back to my doorstep? I shook my head, trying to push away the negative thoughts. I had to stay strong for Mom's sake and for my own. I wouldn't let Jude destroy everything we'd worked so hard to build. A knock at the door startled me out of my reverie. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Could it be Jude, coming to make good on his threats already? I cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. Relief washed over me as I recognized the face of my old friend, Ethan. I opened the door, managing a weak smile. "Hey, Ethan, what brings you by?" He held up a casserole dish, a sympathetic look on his face. "I figured you might not feel like cooking, what with everything going on. Thought I'd bring you some of my mom's famous lasagna." I took the dish, feeling a rush of gratitude. Thanks, that's really sweet of you. How are you holding up? He asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. I'm okay, considering. Just trying to get the house in order and sort through all the legal stuff. Ethan nodded, hesitating for a moment before speaking again. I heard Jude showed up at the funeral. Did he give you any trouble? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. He's demanding his share of the inheritance, threatening to contest the will if I don't give in. Ethan's jaw tightened, a flash of anger in his eyes. That son of a bitch! After everything he's done, he has the nerve to show his face here? I know, I said, feeling a surge of appreciation for Ethan's loyalty. But I'm not going to let him bully me into giving him what he wants. Mom left everything to me for a reason, and I intend to honor her wishes. Ethan placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. If you need anything at all, you know I'm here for you, right? You don't have to go through this alone. I nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened to fall. I know. Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot. As he turned to leave, I felt a small glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. I may have been facing the fight of my life, but at least I had people like Ethan in my corner. I just prayed that would be enough to keep Jude and his demons at bay. The next morning, I found myself sitting in the cluttered office of my mother's lawyer, Mr. Hanson. He slid a stack of papers across the desk, his expression somber. Your mother was very clear in her wishes, Raven, he said, tapping the documents with his finger. She left the entire estate to you, the house, the savings, everything. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed quickly by a sense of unease. I knew this news would only fuel Jude's anger and resentment. As if on cue, the door to the office burst open, and Jude stormed in, his girlfriend Amber trailing behind him. In Amber's arms was a young boy, no more than 6 years old, his wide eyes taking in the scene with a mix of curiosity and fear. What the hell is this? Jude demanded, slamming his hand down on the desk. I have a right to my share of the inheritance. Mr. Hanson remained calm, folding his hands in front of him. I'm sorry, Jude, but your mother's will is ironclad. She left everything to Raven. Jude turned to me, his face twisted with rage. You did this, didn't you? You poisoned her against me, turned her into a bitter old woman who couldn't even find it in her heart to provide for her own son. I stood up, my own anger rising to the surface. I didn't do anything, Jude. Mom made her decision based on your actions, your choices. You have no one to blame but yourself. Amber stepped forward, her voice dripping with venom. You think you're so perfect, don't you, Raven? The dutiful daughter, the one who can do no wrong. But I see right through you. You manipulated your mother, turned her against Jude, all so you could keep the money for yourself. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. You don't know anything about my mother, Amber, or about me, and I don't owe you a damn thing. Jude's eyes narrowed, his voice low and threatening. This isn't over, Raven. I'll make you regret the day you crossed me. I'll drag you through court, air all of our family's dirty laundry until there's nothing left of your precious reputation. I met his gaze unflinchingly. Go ahead, Jude. I have nothing to hide. But you? You've got a closet full of skeletons, and I won't hesitate to expose every last one of them if you push me. Amber scoffed, shifting the child in her arms. Come on, Jude. We don't need this. We'll find another way to get what's ours. As they turned to leave, Jude paused at the door, his voice low and menacing. This isn't over, Raven. Not by a long shot. The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone with Mr. Hanson. I sank back into my chair, my heart racing. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, Mr. Hanson said, his voice sympathetic. But you handled it well. Your mother would be proud. I nodded, swallowing past the lump in my throat. I just wish she was here. I wish I didn't have to do this alone. Mr. Hanson leaned forward, his expression serious. Raven, I've known your family for a long time, and I can tell you this. Your mother had her reasons for leaving everything to you. She trusted you to do what's right, to protect your family's legacy. Don't let Jude or anyone else make you doubt that. I took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of determination. I won't. I'll fight for what's mine, for what Mom wanted, no matter what it takes. As I left the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Jude wasn't going to back down easily, and I knew I had to be prepared for whatever he might throw my way. But I also knew that I had the truth on my side, and the love of a mother who believed in me, and that was a powerful weapon indeed. A few days later, I was in the kitchen, sorting through a box of Mom's old recipes, when I heard a sharp knock at the door. I tensed, instantly on guard. After the confrontation with Jude at the lawyer's office, I was always on edge, waiting for the next attack. I opened the door to find Amber standing on the porch, her arms crossed, a scowl on her face. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the house. I followed her into the living room, my defenses up. "What do you want, Amber?" She whirled around, her eyes blazing with anger. "I want what's rightfully ours, Raven. Jude deserves a share of the inheritance, and you know it." I shook my head, my own anger rising to the surface. Jude deserves nothing. He lost any right to this family's money the moment he chose drugs over his own flesh and blood. Amber laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "You really believe that, don't you? That you're the saint and Jude's the sinner? Well, let me tell you something, Raven. You're not as innocent as you pretend to be." I felt a flicker of unease, but I pushed it down. "What are you talking about?" She stepped closer, her voice low and menacing. "I know about the money, Raven. The money you stole from your mother's account right before she died. I felt like I'd been slapped." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice shaking. "I never stole anything from my mother." Amber smirked, a triumphant gleam in her eye. "Really? Because I have proof, bank statements showing large withdrawals from your mother's account, right around the time she got sick, and I'm sure the police would be very interested to know about it." I shook my head, my mind racing. "You're lying. You don't have any proof, because there is no proof. I would never steal from my own mother." Amber shrugged, her voice casual. "Maybe not. But who do you think the police will believe? The grieving daughter, or the son with a history of drug abuse and criminal behavior? I'm sure Jude would be more than happy to testify against you if it meant getting his hands on the money." I felt sick to my stomach, the room spinning around me. "What do you want, Amber?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "I want what's fair, Raven. I want a share of the inheritance for Jude and for our son. And if you don't give it to us, I'll make sure everyone knows about your little theft. I'll destroy your reputation, your life, everything you hold dear." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. When I opened them again, my voice was steady, my resolve unwavering. "Get out of my house, Amber, and tell Jude that if he wants a war, he's got one. But I won't be bullied, and I won't be blackmailed. Not by him, and certainly not by you." Amber's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Raven. I promise you that." She turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I sank down onto the couch, my head in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. I knew Amber was lying about the money. I would never steal from my mother, no matter how desperate I was. But I also knew that Jude would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, even if it meant destroying me in the process. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I needed proof, something to show that Jude was the real criminal, not me, and I knew just where to start looking. I reached for my phone, dialing a familiar number. "Ethan, it's Raven. I need your help. Jude and Amber are trying to blackmail me, and I need to find evidence of Jude's criminal activities. Can you meet me at the house tomorrow morning?" As I hung up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't going to let Jude and Amber win, no matter what it took. I would find the truth, and I would make them pay for their lies and their betrayal. No one messed with my family and got away with it. No one. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the house, his face etched with concern. "I came as soon as I could," he said, following me into the living room. "What's going on, Raven? What did Jude and Amber do?" I took a deep breath, my hands shaking slightly. "They're trying to blackmail me, Ethan. Amber claims she has proof that I stole money from my mother's account, and she's threatening to go to the police if I don't give them a share of the inheritance." Ethan's eyes widened, his jaw clenching. "That's ridiculous. You would never do something like that." I nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for his unwavering support. "I know, but Jude and Amber are desperate, and they'll say anything to get what they want. That's why I need your help, Ethan. I need to find evidence of Jude's criminal activities, something to prove that he's the real threat, not me." Ethan nodded, his expression determined. I'll do whatever I can to help, Raven. You know that. But where do we start? I hesitated, biting my lip. I have an idea, but it's risky. I remember overhearing Jude talking to one of his old drug buddies a few years ago, something about a storage unit where he kept his stash. If we can find that unit and get inside, maybe we can find the evidence we need. Ethan frowned, his voice cautious. Raven, that's a big risk. If Jude catches us snooping around, there's no telling what he might do. I met his gaze, my voice firm. I know it's dangerous, Ethan, but I don't have a choice. If I don't find something to hold over Jude's head, he and Amber will destroy me. I have to do this, with or without your help. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Okay, I'm in, but we do this my way, Raven. We be smart, we be careful, and we don't take any unnecessary risks. Agreed? I nodded, feeling a rush of relief. Agreed. We spent the next few hours combing through old phone records and emails, trying to find any clue as to the location of Jude's storage unit. Finally, we hit pay dirt, an old text message from Jude to his buddy, mentioning a unit at a storage facility on the outskirts of town. This is it, I said, my heart racing with excitement. This is our chance to take Jude down. Ethan nodded, his expression grim. Let's do this. But remember, Raven, we get in, we get what we need, and we get out. No heroics, no confrontations. We stick to the plan. I agreed, my mind already racing ahead to the moment when I would finally have the upper hand against Jude and Amber. That night, Ethan and I drove out to the storage facility, our hearts pounding with adrenaline. Using a set of bolt cutters, we broke the lock on Jude's unit and slipped inside, flashlights sweeping the darkness. At first, all we found were boxes of old clothes and furniture, the detritus of Jude's tumultuous life. But then, buried in the back of the unit, we hit the jackpot. A large duffel bag stuffed to the brim with bundles of cash and plastic baggies filled with white powder. Oh my God, I breathed, my hands shaking as I lifted one of the baggies to the light. This is it, Ethan. This is the proof we need. Ethan nodded, his expression grim. We need to get this to the police, Raven. With this evidence, Jude will be going away for a long time. I felt a rush of triumph, mixed with a strange sense of sadness. Jude was still my brother, after all, no matter how much pain he had caused. But I knew that this was the only way to protect myself and my family's legacy. As we drove away from the storage facility, the duffel bag safely stowed in the trunk of Ethan's car, I felt a sense of hope for the first time in weeks. Jude and Amber had underestimated me, and now they were going to pay the price. I just hoped that when the dust settled, there would still be something left of my family to salvage. The next few days were a blur of activity. Ethan turned the evidence we had found over to his colleagues at the police department, and they quickly obtained a warrant to search Jude's house and arrest him on drug charges. I watched from the window of my mother's house as the police cars pulled up, their lights flashing and sirens blaring. I felt a sense of grim satisfaction as I watched Jude being let out in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. But my satisfaction was short-lived. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard a loud crash from outside. I ran to the window, my heart pounding, and saw that someone had thrown a brick through the front window of my car, shattering the glass. I called Ethan immediately, my voice shaking with anger and fear. Ethan, someone just vandalized my car. It has to be Amber, retaliating for Jude's arrest. Ethan arrived within minutes, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. I'll file a report, Raven, but without any witnesses or evidence, there's not much we can do. I nodded, feeling a sense of helplessness wash over me. What about Amber? Have you been able to track her down? Ethan shook his head, his expression frustrated. No, she's gone to ground. We have an APB out on her, but so far no luck. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. She's not going to stop, Ethan. She blames me for Jude's arrest, and she'll do anything to make me pay. Ethan placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, his voice firm. We'll find her, Raven. I promise. In the meantime, I want you to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone, and keep your doors and windows locked at all times. I agreed, feeling a chill run down my spine at the thought of Amber lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, watching and judging. Rumors began to circulate around town, whispers that I had stolen money from my own mother, that I had set Jude up to take the fall for my own crimes. I tried to ignore the gossip, focusing on the task of sorting through my mother's belongings and getting the house ready to sell. But it was hard, especially when the vandalism continued. Slashed tires on my car, graffiti sprayed across the front of the house, threatening notes left on my doorstep. Through it all, Ethan remained my rock, my one constant in a sea of chaos. He checked in on me every day, making sure I was safe and offering words of comfort and support. But even Ethan couldn't stop the fear that gnawed at my gut, the constant sense of unease that followed me wherever I went. I knew that Amber was out there somewhere, plotting her revenge, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before she struck. One evening, as I was locking up the house for the night, I heard a noise from the backyard, a rustling in the bushes, the snap of a twig underfoot. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as I reached for my phone with shaking hands. But before I could dial Ethan's number, I heard a voice from the darkness, a voice that sent chills down my spine and made my blood run cold. "Hello, Raven?" Amber stepped out of the shadows, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "It's time we had a little chat, don't you think?" I backed away, my eyes wide with fear as Amber advanced on me, her eyes glittering with malice. "You ruined my life, Raven," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You took away the only thing that mattered to me, and now I'm going to make you pay." I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could make a sound, Amber lunged forward, a glint of steel flashing in the moonlight. And then everything went black. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. I groaned, my head pounding as I reached for the device with clumsy fingers. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of lines obscuring the caller ID, but I managed to swipe to answer the call. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice hoarse and raspy. "Raven." Amber's voice was cold, with an undercurrent of malicious glee. "I hope you're feeling better. You took quite a nasty fall last night." I sat up, wincing as a bolt of pain shot through my skull. Memories of the previous evening came flooding back. Amber lunging at me with a knife, the struggle in the dark, the sickening crack of my head hitting the ground. "What do you want, Amber?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What I've always wanted, Raven. Justice, revenge, and now I have the perfect way to get it." I heard a rustling on the other end of the line, and then Amber's voice again, this time with a note of triumph. "I have something that belongs to you, Raven, something that could ruin you if it ever got out." My blood ran cold, a sense of dread settling in the pit of my stomach. "What are you talking about?" Amber laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "I'm talking about the proof of your dirty little secret, Raven, the one you've been hiding from everyone, even your precious Ethan." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of confusion and fear. "I don't know what you're talking about, Amber. I don't have any secrets." "Don't lie to me, Raven." Amber's voice was a snarl, filled with rage and contempt. "I know all about the money you stole from your mother, the way you manipulated her into cutting Jude out of the will, and now I have the evidence to prove it." I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the air rushing out of my lungs in a whoosh. "That's not true," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I never stole anything from my mother." Amber scoffed, her voice dripping with scorn. "Save it, Raven. I have the bank statements, the transfer records, everything. And unless you want the whole world to know what a lying, thieving bitch you really are, you'll do exactly what I say." I closed my eyes, my mind racing as I tried to process Amber's words. I knew she was lying, that the evidence she claimed to have was nothing but a fabrication. But I also knew that if she went public with her accusations, it would be my word against hers. And with Jude's history of criminal behavior, who would believe me? "What do you want, Amber?" I asked, my voice flat and defeated. "I want what's mine, Raven. I want the money that should have been Jude's, the inheritance that you stole from him, and I want you to suffer the way you made Jude suffer." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "And if I refuse?" Amber's voice was a purr, filled with malicious satisfaction. "Then I'll destroy you, Raven. I'll make sure that everyone knows what a fraud you are, that you're no better than the brother you despise. And when I'm done, you'll have nothing left. No money, no reputation, no future." I felt a wave of despair wash over me. the weight of Amber's threats crushing me like a physical blow. I knew I was trapped, caught between two equally terrible choices: give in to Amber's demands and lose everything I had fought so hard to protect, or refuse and watch as my life was destroyed by her lies and manipulation. "I need time to think," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just give you the money, Amber. I need to figure out a way to do it without raising suspicion." Amber's voice was cold, filled with impatience and barely contained rage. "You have 24 hours, Raven. If I don't have the money by then, I'll go to the police, the press, everyone. And trust me, when I'm done, you'll be lucky if you have a cardboard box to sleep in." The line went dead, the dial tone echoing in my ear like a death knell. I sat there for a long moment, my mind reeling as I tried to process the enormity of the situation I found myself in. I knew I needed help, someone to turn to in my darkest hour. With shaking hands, I dialed Ethan's number, praying that he would answer, that he would know what to do. Because if he couldn't help me, I knew that I was well and truly lost. Ethan arrived at my house within the hour, his face etched with concern as he took in my haggard appearance. "Raven, what's going on? You sounded terrible on the phone." I took a deep breath, my hands shaking as I poured myself a cup of coffee. "It's Amber. She's threatening to expose me, to tell everyone that I stole money from my mother." Ethan's eyes widened, his jaw clenching with anger. "That's ridiculous. You would never do something like that." I shook my head, my voice trembling. "I know, but she says she has evidence, bank statements and transfer records, and if she goes public with it, who's going to believe me? Jude's the one with the criminal record, not me." Ethan was silent for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "Okay," he said finally, his voice calm and determined. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up a sting operation, catch Amber in the act of extorting you. If we can get her on tape admitting to blackmail, we'll have all the evidence we need to put her away for good." I felt a flicker of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness that had consumed me. "Do you really think that will work?" Ethan nodded, his expression fierce. "It has to. We can't let Amber get away with this, Raven. We have to make her pay for what she's done." We spent the next few hours planning the details of the operation, working out the logistics of how to lure Amber into a trap. Ethan would wire me with a hidden microphone while he and his team waited nearby, ready to swoop in and make the arrest. As the appointed time drew near, I felt a sense of nervousness and dread settle in the pit of my stomach. I knew that everything depended on this moment, that if I couldn't pull off the sting, Amber would destroy me. I arrived at the designated meeting spot, a secluded park on the outskirts of town, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for Amber to show up. When she finally appeared, emerging from the shadows like a wraith, I felt a chill run down my spine. "Do you have the money?" Amber asked, her voice cold and demanding. I nodded, holding up a briefcase filled with blank paper. "It's all here, but before I give it to you, I want to know why. Why are you doing this to me, Amber?" "What did I ever do to you?" Amber laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "You really have to ask? You ruined my life, Raven. You took Jude away from me, turned him against me, and now you're going to pay for it." I shook my head, my voice trembling with anger and disgust. "Jude ruined his own life, Amber. He made his choices, and he had to face the consequences, just like you will." Amber's eyes narrowed, her hand reaching into her pocket. "What are you talking about?" I smiled, a sense of triumph welling up inside me. "I'm talking about the fact that this entire conversation is being recorded, and that the police are on their way here right now, ready to arrest you for extortion and blackmail." Amber's face went white, her eyes widening with shock and fear. She turned to run, but it was too late. Ethan and his team were already there, surrounding her with guns drawn. As I watched Amber being led away in handcuffs, her son Liam clinging to her leg and crying, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was over. The nightmare that had consumed my life for the past few weeks was finally over. Ethan came over to me, his expression one of pride and admiration. "You did it, Raven. You stood up to her, and you won." I nodded, feeling a sense of exhaustion and release. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ethan. Thank you for everything." As we walked away from the park, the sun setting behind us, I felt a sense of hope and possibility for the first time in years. I knew that there would be challenges ahead, that Jude's conviction and Amber's arrest were only the beginning. But I also knew that I was strong enough to face whatever came my way. And with Ethan by my side, I knew that I would never have to face it alone.